All right, let me get rid of that. Okay, the origins of Haitian voodoo and voodoo then in the African American community are pretty complex. I would like to try and walk you from Africa through Haiti to the US so that that first third to half of the chapter might fall into place a little better for you. So when we start talking about voodoo, we are going to trace back to Benin on the armpit. I should have an image up here. Can you guys find that map for me? Anyway, on the hump of Africa, Benin is one of the key areas where slavery was pursued. So we're tracing our roots back to the people who came out of the region of Benin, and we learned from Pin that those people were not organized so much by a top-down kingdom as they were by by generation kind of their own internal splitting and divisions, and they are influenced by the Yoruba kingdoms, which are some of the most established kingdoms of Africa, and they are to the east of Benin. And so chapters 1 and chapter 2, in both cases, we end up hearing about Yoruba and Yoruba pantheon, the Orishas of the Yoruba. This could become very complicating. Let's not make it complicating. Let's just start to learn and get familiar with the fact that we're starting in Benin with the Dahomey tradition, religious tradition, but that next to it is the Yorubas, and that those two have been influencing and informing each other. So, from Benin, a large number of the Africans who were enslaved end up being part of the slave trade that gets to Haiti. So let's take a step back. 1492, Christopher Columbus comes into the island, decimates the indigenous population of the Arawak there, and they need to replace the Arawak with another slave labor force, and so they start tapping into the triangle that brings slaves from Africa into New World ports. So you pick up goods from the New World ports, bring them to Europe, sell them in Europe, and bring European goods down to Africa. And so it's a wonderful setup for the people in charge. So Haiti, something interesting, really interesting happens here. And because he's moving you through so swiftly, it's hard to catch it all. With Haiti, we have in the late 1700s, all right, first of all, we have the Spanish with Christopher Columbus, but over time the French start moving in, right, and they get half of the island, and then ultimately they get control of the island as it increases in importance for them as a place for that tremendous wealth that was generated out of slave labor, particularly in the cultivation of sugar. So never doubt how important sugar has been over the last 400 years. It organized an entire system of the dehumanization and free labor system that we call slavery, as surely as it is organizing healthcare in America today. Go sugar! I'll get back to our point here. We're in Haiti. The French assume governance of the island, and the French in the mid-1700s go through their own internal revolution. Has anybody heard Égalité, Fraternité, Liberté, right? So the slogan of the French Revolution, and this is heard out there in Haiti by those who could read, and they, especially the people who have managed to establish themselves in dominant positions in terms of the slave and plantation system, some of which are um, are black or mulatto farmers who managed to gain some control, or these might be peasant people from France who now are exercising the kind of wealth and authority that only um, a duke or somebody like that in France could have experienced. So they're loving the language of egalite and fraternite. But wouldn't you know, the slaves who can read, who start figuring this stuff out, also like this language. So that the earliest and most successful slave revolution happens in Haiti, late 1700s, and by 1805, led by Toussaint Louverture, a man who was called the Black Napoleon, the free slaves who had managed to get themselves up into the highlands and were now living in communities together, influenced by their Dahomey traditions, and therefore calling on the ancestors to help make them strong, have a successful revolution and fight for their liberty. So 1805, Haiti and slavery. Now, the French government, the Vatican, and the Americans all get all scared and nervous because who wants to have a model of slaves successfully revolting and declaring their freedom around? So the Vatican pulls out its Catholic world from 1805 to mid 1880s. The Catholic Church retracts because to be there would be to condone the freedom of the slaves. And the Catholic Church cannot take that wager. They are still invested in the language of divine right to um, enslave people. There is a series of papal bulls that have given Catholics the right to enslave people and take their land and any produce and products from the land. So they're still working with what has been called the doctrine of discovery. And so when the slaves revolt, they retract. This means not only were the slaves using a discourse, a register of having called on the ancestors, but now the authority of the Catholic Church is gone for the better part of the 1800s. And so the voodoo origins, as these people move from slave to small kind of territorial farming groups, the voodoo takes stronghold across the region. Nevertheless, for let's say 200 years, from 1492 to the late 1700s, the Catholic Church had played a big role, and so the use of Catholic imagery and iconography had been significant through that whole time. And so you see this twinning in Haiti of Virgin Mary and Urzuli, for example. And this twinning allowed the African community, who were not kidding themselves about the Virgin Mary, right? The Virgin Mary had been pretty powerful. She was part of that world who had kicked your butts. So one didn't mind sending a little homage to the Virgin Mary. If she was helping them Catholics and them French people out, you might as well get a piece of that action. But at the same time, by twinning her with their own African Orisha, Urzuli, then they create a system of slipping signs so that if the Catholic priest is there and looking, it looks like you have a little altar in your home made to all the Catholic saints. But meanwhile, you have a double language happening. You're both playing by the terms that you have to play by. Remember that they have passed codes that require them, like the Code Noir, you have to baptize in Christian names and into Christianity all the enslaved. So these are people who have to work in the register of Christianity because their government has legislated that. And then, so after that freedom, you nevertheless have a group of people who are invested in this twinned iconography of Catholic saints and their Orishas. They have about 80 years for the Orishas to gain a kind of ascendancy. But then by 1868, when the Pope and the Catholic Church decides it's time to come back, all right, apparently we're not going to end the liberty here, so let's go back and reclaim the souls. So everybody needs to be baptized. When the Catholic Church comes back, then you have this interplay of saints and Orishas happening there. So that's a lot already. And then those roots bring us into an American context when we have another bunch of immigration from Haiti into the States, where Pien has already told us, and he agrees with Chirot here, right, that throughout slave culture, there was still, through those conjure traditions that we studied, and through further archaeological evidence, we still haven't begun to cover all of this stuff. There is an enduring line of Afro-informed spirituality happening in the slave communities, and then as the 20th century pursues, as the Haitians start hitting this soil, there are a lot of folks saying, this is my people. This is my way of being African American, because this is allowing me a reconnection with an African root. I'm kind of giving up on ye old Protestantism and Christianity, and the voodoo is feeding my soul. So that's what brings us into an American entertainment of the power that voodoo might offer, and a contemporary African American, as they determine the ultimate significance of their place as a removed, dislocated, renamed, unnamed, renamed people on a new territory, finding this African root. I hope, I kind of wung that one. I hope it was helpful.